I will, but before I do, I think this was a labor of love for many, many people in the room. Can you please stand if you were involved in curriculum refinement or evaluation? I just want to give a round of applause to our collaborators. So Tara, Haley. Thank you. All right, so just to clarify, before I get into methods, I want to talk about what a formative evaluation is and how it's different from an outcomes evaluation. So formative evaluation allows us to field test an intervention while looking at its feasibility, its acceptability, and initial promise or preliminary findings. And the goal here really is to uncover program strengths as well as its challenges so that the program improvements can be made along the way to position the program optimally for a rigorous outcomes evaluation. So throughout this process, we shared the results that we were accumulating along the way with leadership teams so that they could make program modifications and improvements in real time. In terms of data sources, we collected data from 4 different sources during the 2016-17 school year. First, we looked at program implementation data, things like how many groups, number of kids in each group, attendance, etc. We looked at focus group data with our WOW counselors, both after the screening process and then at the end of the academic year. Our WOW counselors also filled out surveys at the end of the year. We did surveys with 170 school staff at the end of the year, also 960 WOW participants, 215 parents of WOW participants across 83 groups in 21 schools. That also included pre-post assessments on a number of key outcomes, such as depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, emotion regulation, et cetera. We also had the opportunity to look at school administrative data. So we were looking at course failures, discipline outcomes, as well as attendance rates. So all of this came together to give us really rich data to move forward.
So with that, it's a fairly large sample size and kind of unique a variety of ways to get data. Can you share some of the highlights of what you learned from the data?
Are you going to go first?
Yeah. Either one of you can.
Yeah. So there were 3 goals. So we had 3 goals of the formative evaluation: feasibility. So how possible is it to implement WOW as it was designed? Acceptability. How is WOW being received? And then initial promise. So I'm going to talk about the first 2 of those. So the first goal of the formative evaluation was to evaluate the feasibility. Is it possible to implement WOW as it was designed during the year that we were doing this research? And as Rebecca was saying, the real benefit of formative evaluation is that you get to learn what's working and what's not working as well as it should be. And we have, again, a gift and the opportunity to make those changes before we enter into a formal impact or outcome evaluation. So I'm going to talk about some of the feasibility findings. We learned a lot, that a lot of what we intended for WOW was working as we expected it to, and that there were also a few opportunities to really think about what changes we could make to make sure that WOW was working as well as it could. One of the feasibility findings was that when we started this year, we had a really formal, strict screening process. The goal was to screen all of the girls with these mental health measures and then make determinations about whether or not they met the selection criteria for WOW. We realized in our real-world environment where we deliver WOW that just wasn't feasible. The demand for WOW was so great. The timing of it didn't work. Implementing these screenings was a really intensive process. But we made all these decisions based on data. Most of the girls, almost all of the girls were eventually screened, but only a third of them were screened before they were enrolled in WOW. But when we looked at the screening data, we realized that almost all of the girls met the criteria anyway. 94% of our girls met our inclusion criteria, so we modified the definition of WOW. We modified the criteria for WOW as living in high-risk environments where risk for trauma, risk for emotional dysregulation is common. So that's one of the changes we made. Another really important change that we made in response to feasibility findings was that originally the WOW program was designed as a 26-lesson curriculum designed to be delivered in 1 year. And we realized that just wasn't possible. The data showed us, I think it was 15. On average, girls received 15 lessons. And so we had lots of discussion about possible solutions to this. The WOW team, again with input from all of the stakeholders, decided to extend the WOW program over 2 years. One of the other things that we've learned from the research that we've been doing over the years is that one of the key elements of WOW is the relationship between the WOW counselor and the student. And so the WOW team decided to prioritize the relationship, extend the program over 2 years. So those are some of the 2 key findings from the feasibility. The second goal of the formative evaluation was to look at acceptability. So how is WOW being received? One of the key takeaways is that WOW was really, really well received. There was a great deal of satisfaction among all of our stakeholder groups. And so students, parents, WOW staff themselves, school staff, really were highly satisfied, and a lot of people, all of our stakeholders, really talked about the value of WOW for the girls. Lots of people could speak to how they saw the impact on the girls that WOW was serving. One of the other findings from the acceptability analyses we did came from the WOW counselors who were themselves administering the screening tools and the assessments. And our WOW counselors are an incredibly talented, highly trained, very capable group who have a deep knowledge about trauma. And so I think one of the key findings from the data that we collected from the WOW counselors, a lot of them were concerned about administering the trauma screen really early on in the enrollment process. Counselors talked about the potential of re-traumatizing girls and not really having the relationship to address the re-traumatization. So the WOW team took that information and pushed back the assessment process until after a few introductory lessons. And they also incorporated more intentional trauma training with the WOW counselors throughout the program.